I'm Joanna Lalikas. I'm the Director of Education at the North Carolina Botanical Garden. Welcome. The North Carolina Botanical Garden and the North Carolina Botanical Garden Foundation acknowledge that the story told about the history of the land we steward has been incomplete. Before the Morgans and Masons, these lands were home to multiple tribes and the ancestors of the Occaneechi band of the Saponi Nation, who persist locally to this day. We acknowledge the Native people today, including many UNC students, faculty, and staff who still gather, walk, hike, and engage with our habitats and gardens on this land. We recognize that at least one of the adjacent lands we steward, Mason Farm Biological Reserve, was first cleared, cultivated, and worked by Native Americans, and later by African enslaved people. We invite you to reflect on our individual and community roles in knowing the whole story about the land we each steward. Today, we're excited to bring you Craig Blackmar of Leaf and Limb. We're grateful for our partnership with Leaf and Limb on this program. Craig is an industry veteran who began his career in 1988. He is an ISA board certified master arborist with the tree risk assessment qualification and an illustrious member of the Leaf and Limb sales team. His superpower is plant healthcare. I love that. It is a superpower. If you have trees or shrubs that are in need of help, Craig is your expert. He's also a skillful musician. He makes the mandolin purr like a kitten with catnip, and he also plays the guitar and saxophone. One of his favorite quotes is, "All music is folk music because it's played by folks," and that is quoted from one of my favorite musicians, Jeremy Garcia. So thank you for joining us, Craig. We're grateful to have you with us, and I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Joanna, and thank you all for being here today. I'm so happy to be able to give this presentation. I was certainly hoping to be able to do it in person, but things are what they are, and so maybe we'll do that again someday. But so I will start off by just a little icebreaker question, something for you guys to think about. And if you'd like to answer it in the chat, please do. Just curious as to what everyone's favorite tree is. If you have a favorite tree, it could be a famous tree. Believe it or not, there are some famous trees. It could be something as general as a tree species or family, or a particular tree from memory, throughout your life. My favorite tree is the white oak, and more particularly the swamp white oak. It's just a wonderful tree that provides so many benefits to everything in its ecosystems. And again, I am going to present to you today about how trees can save the world and what we can do to help. This program essentially has three parts. The first, I'm going to tell you about some pressing issues here on the planet. Then I'm going to tell you about trees' relationships to these issues and how they can help to solve these issues. And then I'm going to tell you about what you can do to help with this whole mission of solving these issues. All right, and so with no further ado, we will get started. Did anyone answer the question there in chat, David? We can touch on that.
We had a bunch of great answers. Yeah. Red buds coming in, dogwoods, magnolia, the beech tree, sugar maple, eastern red cedar, Schumer oak, bladdernut, ginkgo, fringe tree. So many great options. I don't know how people choose a favorite.
Well, I tell people this all the time, usually my favorite tree might be the one I'm standing in front of, because they all have such wonderful, features and benefits. Lots of flowering native trees were mentioned there. The eastern red cedar, every time I see one, I'm just in awe. Almost every time I look up there, I see some birds. They just love the cedar trees. So, all right, well, let's get started. Oh, and I will back up again. Please do hold your questions till the end. I'm going to try to get through all this information, and there's quite a bit in a real timely manner. And then hopefully I'll have some time for Q&A at the end. I will do my best. And if not, I can answer questions via email afterwards, and I will be sure to answer any questions that I receive. All right, now we can get started. So planet Earth is a great place to live, but there's a lot of pressing issues that threaten our mere existence here on the planet. And I'm going to cover a bunch of these. First of all, we are losing lots and lots of trees. If we scale the age of the planet to just 46 years, humans will have been here for all of 4 minutes. The Industrial Revolution began 1 minute ago, and in that time, we have lost more than 50% of the planet's forests. That came from Greenpeace. Every 2 seconds, 1,000, 1,000, we lose another football field of trees. With the trees, we're losing our wildlife. The World Wildlife Federation estimates that we have lost more than 60% of all animals and bugs within the last 50 years. And I know this firsthand. I travel back and forth to the coast on a really regular basis. And I can remember as a kid, we drive to the beach, you get to the beach and you look at the windshield in the front of the car and it would just be completely covered in bugs. I drive to the beach nowadays, I can go to the beach and back and literally count the number of bugs on the front of my truck. It blows my mind, how few insects there actually are these days. We all like to breathe. We take this for granted here in the Triangle. We're quite fortunate, in most of North Carolina for that matter, is that we have pretty dense tree canopy cover over most of the state of North Carolina, but some places of the world, this is not the case. The World Health Organization says that more than 4.2 million premature deaths have been caused or are related to air pollution. Have a colleague whose brother spent some time teaching English in Shanghai, China. And while he was there, and he wasn't there for a couple of years, but he said he only saw a blue sky on a few days. The air there is so bad that people wear masks everywhere they go every day. And this was prior to COVID. It's so bad that they erected a billboard for tourists to pose in front of with a big picture of the skyline because you can never actually even see it. While he was there for just a little less than 2 years, he developed breathing problems and a lump on his neck. And his doctor said it was all related to the pollution there. There's a theme here throughout the talk in that soil is very, very important. The World Wildlife Federation estimates that we have lost more than 1/2 of the Earth's topsoil within the last 150 years. There's a recent documentary called Kiss the Ground on Netflix. And in that documentary, they estimated that we may have as little as 60 more years before all of the topsoil is gone. And they said 60 harvests. That's like tomorrow. Our drinking water is disappearing at a breakneck speed. NASA estimates that 21 of our 37 largest aquifers are being depleted at a rate too fast to be naturally replenished. Companies like Coca-Cola are buying up land just for the water. There may come a day, or there likely will come a day, where we're paying more for a gallon of water than we do for a gallon of milk or even gasoline. Carbon, it's all about carbon. Carbon exists in two manners. It's either released as oxidized carbon, or CO2, or it's sequestered, in other words, held in place. And it can only be sequestered in a few places, and that's in plants, in the soil, and in the ocean. NASA estimates that we've had a 38% increase in carbon dioxide in our atmosphere in the last 200 years. So it's phenomenal, and we don't even begin to understand the full effects of this. So the question is, what can we do? Plant trees. We need to plant lots and lots and lots of trees. We need billions of trees. Trees are and have always been one of nature's most powerful tools in creating the planet that we live on. There was a time when Earth was inhabitable, and as plants evolved, they basically changed the atmosphere to where we had air that we could breathe, and then animals could then exist. If we keep going the way we're going, the planet will no longer be habitable, but the planet will go on. And eventually, I believe that plants will take it back and start the whole process over again. We'll go back to my oak tree as an example. The oak tree can support more than 50 different varieties of caterpillar. They provide homes for birds, bats, all kinds of vertebrates, squirrels, possums, raccoons, you name it. They also contribute a food source, a staple of the diet of many vertebrates, deers, raccoons, crows, lots and lots of animals feed on the acorns. Like I said, they provide home for many animals, as well as the microbiology that lives on the bark, in the leaf litter at the base of the tree, in the soil, in the roots. And if you think about that oak tree, it's like a neighborhood and a grocery store all in one. And then when you think about a forest ecosystem, it's more like a city or even a state or a nation for that matter. Trees are like giant air filters. The University of Washington did a study of 55 cities, and they estimated that the trees in those cities removed 711,000 metric tons of ozone particulate every year. I don't know what a metric ton looks like, but according to them, 711,000 metric tons is the equivalent of 4,000 blue whales. It's amazing how much pollution the trees can pull down out of the air. I was telling you that we're losing all of our topsoil. We're losing it to erosion. We're also losing it to poor agricultural practices and mostly development. And most erosion happens during storms. And when we look at stormwater, 1 inch of rainfall on 1 acre of hardscape will yield 25,000 gallons of water. That same inch of rain on an acre of planted space will only yield 1,000 gallons of water. This is a 25-to-1 ratio. Our drinking water. Not only do the trees hold the soil in place, but they collect that water, they filter the pollutants out of the storm water, and they draw that back down to our aquifers. It's estimated that forests are responsible for more than 60% of the clean water that we have here in the United States. Crowler Labs identified 2.2 billion acres of non-agricultural land here in the United States. They estimate that if we could reforest just that land, we could recapture 66% of the carbon that's been released over the last 200 years. That's phenomenal. Renowned botanist Diana Beresford Kroger, she has what she calls her bio plan for the planet. She says that if everyone on the planet planted one tree a year, we could actually reverse the effects of climate change in 6 years. So what can we do about all this? As I said, we need billions and billions of trees. And as Diana Kroger said, if everyone could plant one tree a year, we could reverse the effects of climate change. What we know is not everyone can plant one tree a year, but some of us can plant numerous trees. And if we would all just do that, we could really help to save the planet. But if we're going to plant trees, we need to think about the trees we're going to plant. We need to have a plan. We should have a goal. When planting a tree, a great goal is to save the planet, but another is, am I planting this tree for aesthetics, for beauty? Am I planting it to screen out my neighbor's ugly garage? Am I planting it for wildlife? What is my purpose for planting this tree? Then we should do a little bit of research into the tree itself and ask ourselves, is this the right tree for my location? Do I have enough space for this tree to grow? Will it stand a chance at longevity? And here's an example of where no thought was put into this. I'm not sure if that tree is still there, but if it's not, it won't be for long. I'm amazed, though, at the resilience of this tree. Just looking at the leaves on the tree, it looks like it's relatively healthy to be growing in almost zero root space. Planting trees is not rocket science, but there really is one critical part of this, and that is the root collar. The root collar is the area of the tree where the trunk of the tree basically becomes roots or the root system become trunk. That part of the tree, a transition zone, if you were, is designed to be dry and above grade. If it's buried, it starts to create lots of problems, and we will go into this in a video.
You've probably seen this in the suburban landscape. This is what we call a mulch volcano. It looks great, but it's actually very harmful to the tree. Different parts of the tree are designed to perform different functions. The roots, for example, they are underground, they stay moist, they absorb water. The trunk is designed to grow above ground where it's supposed to stay dry. But having this mulch piled around the base of the tree constantly means that the cells of the trunk stay oversaturated. This causes damage to the cells, which means they're not able to perform their duties, which means the overall health of the tree begins to decline. In addition, the mulch volcano provides an excellent place for new roots to grow, and they begin growing round and round the trunk of the tree. Over time, this leads to girdling. Girdling roots will quite literally strangle a tree. This may sound bad, but the story actually gets worse. As the health of the tree declines, it becomes more susceptible to attack from pests and disease. To give an analogy, it's much like the human immune system. As your immune system becomes weaker, you become more susceptible to the cold, to the flu, and to other sicknesses. But the good news is, this is a problem that we can fix. volcano is gone and the trunk is clear of dirt and debris, there's no longer any opportunity for the roots to grow around the trunk. And we've got exactly what we want, which is we have a nice, well-developed root flare at the base of the trunk. The root flare is where the trunk spreads out before becoming roots that disappear underground. That's exactly what we're going for.
All right. If you ask me what type of plants, what type of tree to plant, I'm gonna, my first choice is always going to be something native. Our native trees are going to provide so much more benefit for all of our wildlife, especially our pollinators, than something non-native. Something truly native would be a tree that's native here to the Triangle or North Carolina, and what we call a near native may be a tree that's just native to North America or the United States. One thing we're finding as our weather patterns seem to be changing and shifting is that we can likely plant trees that were naturally native to a much more southern climate than where we are today. In the long run will do just fine here and may help us in the long run. For ideas about native plants, you can go to our website and we have a great PDF that'll list lots of native plant choices. And the World Wildlife Federation has a great plant finder on their website. If you go there to the actually it's the National Wildlife Fund is who that is, and type in plant finder, then you type in your zip code and it'll generate a list for you and give you lots of ideas for native plants. My big takeaway here is when planting, do a little bit of homework. A Google search can really be your friend in searching, as much information about a tree or shrub or anything else that you want to plant before you plant, and it'll give you some helpful information and arm you to be able to plant the best plant for your site. I'll talk about mulch. We recommend using arborist wood chips, but there are lots and lots of different types of mulch out there. Mulch in general does three primary things. It holds water, it cuts down on competition for weeds and invasive species, and most importantly, it's the decomposition of your mulch that actually helps to build and condition your topsoil. We recommend arborist wood chips because arborist wood chips have all the different parts of the tree in it, the leaves, the twigs, the branches, even the trunk wood that are all chipped up. And as those different components are being decomposed by the microorganisms, they're feeding multiple different organisms that will feed on those different parts. So in a nutshell, it's like a balanced diet for your soil. And also, if any of you have ever used the really fine triple shredded mulch, after you put it out there in your landscape and it's there for even a short amount of time, the rainfall tends to mat that mulch down into a really tight mat. And then what happens is the water runs off of it instead of down through it, what we call hydrophobic. Wood chips are less likely to do this because of their coarse nature and all of the pore space in between the wood chips. And there's even a greater benefit to the wood chips is you should be able to get them for free from any local tree company. They all have to dump their trucks and they just assume dump it in your yard, then have to pay to take it into a landfill facility. Nice load of chips there. They look really nice as well. This is one of our many mottos at Leaf and Limb. It's leave the leaves. you can spend hours and or lots of money either blowing, raking, or paying someone to blow and rake and dispose of your leaves. And what you're really doing is getting rid of future topsoil and natural fertilizer for the trees. When the trees drop their leaves, the leaves contain lots of nitrogen. As they decompose, the fungi and the bacteria in the soil convert all of that nitrogen into a form that the tree can then readily accept. And basically, they just recycle themselves. One thing I will never do is recommend fertilization in the forest because it's just not necessary. Chemical fertilizers, I have nothing good to say about them. Nature, as I said, with leaving the leaves, trees actually fertilize themselves. Chemical fertilizers can actually handicap your trees over time. And I'm going to show you a little video about that.
Properties. Traditional fertilizers generate all sorts of problems. They can undermine the stability of your tree. They destroy the relationship between a tree and its beneficial mycorrhizal fungi. They pollute our streams, killing fish and other wildlife. There are some good fertilizer products available, but they are the ones that are focusing on enhancing biology, not on chemical inputs. So you want to look for products that have little to no nitrogen, no phosphorus, beneficial microbes, so those are fungi, bacteria, and then organic matter. Typically, the organic matter is going to be kelp, manure, yucca plant, these sorts of things. Once again, the key is to focus on the biology, the living component of the soil. If that's right, if that's healthy, your tree will receive all the nutrients that it ever needs.
Yeah, that's a mistake that a lot of us have made over the years. I know I did for a long time, put far too much weight on soil analysis and chemical analysis of the soil, when the reality is that if we focus on the biology of the soil, the living organisms in the soil will make everything the way that it's supposed to be. Adding chemicals typically just cause a need for more and more chemicals. If we can fix the soil and improve the biology of the soil and create a healthy ecosystem beneath the ground, I like to think of soil as one big living organism that's made up of many, many, many different microorganisms. But if we can improve the soil and create a healthy ecosystem there, all of the other problems that we encounter with our trees and shrubs will naturally tend to fix themselves.
Here in the forest, the soil has everything it needs. And because of that, it can take care of the trees. It feeds this oak here, and this thing is super happy. Here's the kicker. Each year, this oak drops these leaves. This rotting stuff, this is soil food. And if we have this, we also have air and we have water. This is what keeps soil alive. I'm Basil, and today I'm here to talk about soil. It is alive, and I mean, it's like really alive. It's like you and me. It needs oxygen, it needs water, it needs food. If it has these things, it's going to feed your trees, it's going to take care of your trees, they're going to be healthy, they're going to be happy. If it doesn't have these things, then you get this. This is what used to be a really beautiful old oak tree, and it is suffering right now. It's a sick tree, and let me show you why. Check this out. So I'm going to use this screwdriver, and I'm going to try to push it into the ground. I want you to see how much I struggled to get this thing in. We're talking, oh my goodness, maybe 2 inches, if I'm lucky. That's definitely not full of air. You can just see this stuff. There's no water. And let me see if there's anything in here that looks like rotting food. First soil. No, it's just more of the same. It's dry. It's super hard. There's no rotting stuff in here. This is sick dirt, which means we have a sick tree. Here's the exciting news. We can resurrect this dead dirt and turn it back into healthy soil by replicating what we see in the forest every day. So here I recommend that we put down lots and lots of wood chips, and then we let the leaves fall and rot every single year. That's going to create this amazingness that's full of air and water and giving the soil that rotting stuff it needs to eat. That means we've got healthy, happy soil that can then feed the trees. Now we have healthy, happy trees. It's a win-win. And the best part is this. If we do this on a large scale, then we can restore the health of this planet that we call home.
I like.
Soil's alive and it's hungry. And so am I.
Sorry, I thought that video was over. Yeah, I like to say everything begins and ends in the soil. It's just a process of everything just recycling itself over and over again. Go out and dig beneath the leaf litter and down debris in the forest, and the first thing you'll find is lots of really fine little healthy roots. I go out in the urban landscape and dig, and I just find that dry red clay. It's amazing the difference between healthy soil, healthy living soil, and dirt. All right. Well, that covered planting, mulching, and soil. Now we're going to talk a little bit about other care for the trees in the way of pruning. If you don't know what the branch collar is, it's kind of like what I called the root collar earlier. It's another transition zone between the trunk of the tree and the tree branches, essentially where the branch becomes trunk and the trunk becomes branch. In the very outside of that collar, there are cells that can replicate themselves and grow and heal, as it were, grow new cells and close off wounds to protect the tree against decay. Pruning too far out is much better than too close, because if we prune inside of that branch collar, we cut away those cells that are responsible for closing up the wound. The tree does this in nature also. In the forest, here's a description of the branch collars. But when a tree branch dies on a tree, the tree will naturally start building those cells behind that dead branch and eventually pinch it off. Trees will shed their own branches if it's inefficient growth that's getting no light. That process is called cladaptosis, where the tree, that's maybe the biggest word I use today, hopefully. But the tree will naturally pinch its branches off at the collar. And so when we prune, it's really important that we prune at the outside of that collar. And these descriptions here show you a 3-cut process, where the first cut is made under the branch, and then you cut from the top. And what that does is take the weight off, but that undercut keeps the bark from ripping and tearing as the weight comes off the branch. And then you make a final cut right outside the collar. Just like planting, whenever you prune, you should always have a goal in mind. You should never prune just for the sake of pruning, or because you see your neighbors pruning their tree in this manner or that manner. Your goal can be as simple as aesthetics, in that you may be trying to achieve a desired shape or appearance. At least you have a goal there. Structure is the best reason to prune, is to prune the tree or shrub so that it grows in a stronger manner and it doesn't break under the forces of nature. And otherwise is health. There's some trees are very susceptible to fungal infections in the way of things like leaf spot, and moisture is a major component in the growth of fungus. So if you prune the trees to thin them a little bit and improve light penetration and air circulation, you'll promote drying within the plant and thus reduce the amount of fungal infections. All good reasons to prune. Here's a video about structure.
Here in the forest, trees compete for sunlight. And this means they grow tall, strong, and straight. But if left on their own, like this elm tree here, they often overgrow and end up hurting themselves in the long run. The answer is structural pruning. Hi, I'm Basil, and today we're talking about why we prune. It's the competition here in this forest that forces these trees to grow straight and tall. You'll notice they all have this general structure. They have a central straight trunk and well-balanced branches. This is really important for a tree. It's this ideal structure that helps keep them healthy and prevent breaking. Structure is strength. If we take away the forest, then all of a sudden this lone tree has all of the sunlight it could possibly want. And that means it's going to grow every which way, and it loses that really important structure that we saw in the forest. So I'll show you a couple of examples here on this elm tree. First of all, you'll notice that it has two trunks. And between these two trunks, it has this seam. This is something that could very easily separate in a windstorm, especially as the tree gets older. Then if we look up in the canopy, we see all these large overextended branches. It lacks the structure that we saw in the forest. And unfortunately for this tree, that means that it could split. If that happens, it could cause damage to property, it could hurt somebody. It would almost certainly be the end of this tree's life. The solution is structural pruning. And ideally that begins with a young tree like this oak. But it's important for older trees as well. The idea is that we remove branches to create the structure we're looking for. The process takes many, many years because we can only remove so many branches at any given time. But when it's done, hopefully we've created a tree that looks much like the ones we saw in the forest. That means a straight central trunk and well-spaced branches. For us to live side by side with trees in our neighborhoods means that structural pruning is really important. It helps keep trees healthy, prevents them from breaking, and it keeps us safe. And with all the serious issues that are facing our planet today, we need as many healthy trees as we can get. Here in the forest.
Here's an example of a red maple tree. The one on the left is in the forest, and you can see how it's just tall and straight compared to the tree on the right that has just multiple what we call codominant stems that are competing with each other for dominance. And I like to call them forked maples. I see lots and lots of storm damage in the maple trees, especially in the upper canopies, because of these growth habits that occur when there's all this available light and the trees are just growing wherever the light is. Pesticides. It reminds me, going back to that example of the front of my truck driving back and forth to the beach. I believe that the reason there are so few bugs today is because just an overuse of pesticides. Pesticides typically, especially the ones we call broad spectrum, are indiscriminate. You know, not only do they kill the bad bugs, but they also kill the good bugs. And this is true for all pesticides. Fungicides, technically a pesticide. When we use a fungicide to target a damaging fungus, we kill off all the good fungus. And the good fungus naturally feed on the bad fungi. And so it's very counterproductive. And what we really don't know is what the full effects are on all of the other organisms that may be dependent upon the various different pests that we may be killing with our pesticides. Here's an example of a proposal from a pest management company. And if you notice there, they say a mix of insecticide, miticide, and fungicide. I'm surprised they didn't add in some Roundup and, a nuclear bomb while they were at it, because they're pretty much going to kill everything in the ecosystem with a mix like that.
When treating for pests, you've got to be very specific in how you do so. The goal is to disrupt the life cycle of that specific organism without causing any unintended harm to other members of the ecosystem. Otherwise, you might end with a problem much bigger than the one you started with. Another very effective way to treat pests is to identify the underlying health issue and fix that. Because if you can do that, you'll create a healthy tree that's able to naturally defend itself from these pests by keeping a balanced ecosystem. At the end of the day, the goal is not to eradicate the pests, but rather it's to restore balance to an ecosystem. And we do that by creating a healthy tree.
And we like to talk or I like to talk in what we call thresholds. Is, a threshold of how much damage are we willing to accept? Bugs are going to feed on the plants, but is this feeding actually affecting the health of that plant? If the answer is no, my recommendation is going to be don't treat, because the fallout from using pesticides may be much worse than the little bit of damage that pest was creating on the plant. And again, we only know so much about the relationships between many of the different insects and microorganisms in the ecosystem. And what we do know is that every bug, as it were, has a purpose. And while it may be damaging this plant on the left side of the property, it may be feeding some other organism on the other side of the property. And it's all about balance. So we really don't want to disrupt the balance in the ecosystem if we can help it. And with everything else that I've told you today, creating a healthy plant by starting with healthy soil will typically take care of most of the problems in the landscape. Now, we will have, excuse me, host-specific pests, say emerald ash borer, southern pine beetles, pests that are going to feed on a specific host plant, in which case they're typically either native pests or not native pests, but there's really no natural predator or beneficial insect for some of these pests, in which case we need to take a very targeted approach and actually control these pests. Otherwise, we may lose a given species of tree. That just goes to reiterate what I just said. Everything is related. I say this all the time, everything that I know about plant health, we learn from just looking at the trees and the ecosystems in the forest. If we can make our urban landscapes more resembling of the forest environment, we'll have healthier ecosystems. I said this before, that the trees are the greatest tool that the planet has for creating life here. And so it's important that we take care of the ones that we've got and plant many, many more to offset all of those that have been lost since us humans have been walking on the planet. That concludes the presentation. There's a couple of little notes here. We have lots and lots of free educational information on our company website. We have a program called Treecologist 101. I pride myself as being a treecologist. As a treecologist, I believe that trees are essential for our planet. And my mission is to plant, preserve, and promote trees in a manner that is of maximum benefit to all members of the ecosystem. If you'd like to learn more about this, you can sign up for our Treecologist 101 program. It's a series of newsletters. We're full of videos and articles. And at the very end, we send you a certificate as a treecologist and a free t-shirt. I believe that David is going to include something, a link to our website in there, in something that he is going to send out. And if you'd like to, you can then go to our website and sign up for our normal newsletter as well. All right. Thank you all once again. Now I'm going to look at the Q&A and see if I can answer some questions here.
Sure. Thank you, Craig. We had quite a few questions come in, lots of good ones here. This first one came pretty early on when you were talking about how if every person planted a tree, we could reverse some effects in 6 years. But, you know, we're seeing a lot of wildfires these days. And is there any evidence that, you know, we can outweigh the damage being done by these wildfires?
History shows that wildfires have actually been happening forever, and nature's answer is to simply reforest itself. And so anything we can do to help there is definitely going to be much better than doing nothing. But yeah, the wildfire situation wouldn't be anything like it is if it weren't for humans. There's debates on either side of, is this forest mismanagement? A lot of it has to do with development. The populations are outgrowing the square miles. And so we don't have the ability to let some of the fires burn like we used to, which actually helps to control future fires. I'm not exactly sure about the second question as far as pine needles, but I think that's in regard to mulch. Pine needles are, just part of the natural system of mulching that we have in the forest and everywhere else. They don't break down and produce as much benefit to the soil as of broadleaves and wood chips and mulch and all the other down debris. It just doesn't have as significant an impact in the short run, but over time they're definitely a great factor. Nice thing about pine needles is one, they stay in place a lot better than a lot of other mulches. They don't pick up and float away. They don't move. And they're really easy to apply. To put out a bale of pine straw is a whole lot easier than spreading wheelbarrows full of wood chips. I will admit that. I let the pine needles fall and serve more as a top dressing, but.
Our next question is very much related. It's about arborist chips. Can they be used fresh, or should we age them before using them?
Yeah, so then the question behind that is pretty much the same. We used to think that they needed to compost because when they're breaking down when mulches are composting. They do rob a little bit of nitrogen from the soil, but there have been some really good studies that show that the amount of nitrogen loss from the soil is insignificant compared to the amount that's actually put back as the mulch decomposes. So the answer is no, you do not need to let it sit. I like to let my piles of wood chips sit though, because the stuff in the center of the pile just gets so much better. It just you start to actually see life growing in there as they start to decompose, and the consistency of the mulch gets closer and closer to peat moss as I get down to the bottom of the pile of wood chips. But there is actually no reason to let them sit.
All right, thank you for that.
Tool sharpening, that's a tough one. I would Google knife sharpening services. It really depends on the actual tool. There are different places. Some of the saw shops will sharpen tools. I've had experience with many different companies. Some have come and gone over the years. But I would do an internet search or check some local neighborhood listservs, see where your friends and neighbors are getting their tools sharpened.
And yeah, the last question was actually asked right before you addressed pests, but this is a great example. The emerald ash borer. Should we treat ash trees, and are there other pests that you can think of that we should be treating for?
Yeah, and with the ash trees, I looked at a nice big, luckily healthy ash tree just this morning. What I've seen in just the last 2 years is that the emerald ash borer populations have basically reached critical mass here in our area. They've been here for a little more than 10 years now, but just within the last couple of years, I'm really seeing trees dying everywhere. And what we know from what we've seen throughout the Midwest and the Northeast parts of the country is that they are not going away, and they're left untreated, they will wipe out the ash trees. There are a couple of different types of treatments. One is a stem injection with an insecticide that at its source, the active ingredient is actually derived from a naturally occurring fungus. Otherwise, there is chemical synthesis in that. The alternatives to the stem injection are treatments with chemicals called neonicotinoids, which are believed to be responsible for the collapse of bee populations. And these chemicals in general, they were banned in Europe about 5 years ago. Eventually, they're going to go away here, we hope. And if so, those treatments won't even be an option. But they can be managed. We can treat for the emerald ash borer in the urban environment. From a forestry standpoint, the Forestry Service doesn't have the resources to treat. And so they're left with the only thing they can do, which is remove and essentially burn those trees. But we can save the trees. And if we catch them before the pest has done so much damage that the tree is no longer healthy enough to keep itself around. But if the tree has less than, say, 20% canopy loss, that tree can continue to keep itself healthy, in which case we can control that pest and we can save those trees.
Excellent answer. Thank you for that. We're just about out of time, so I'm going to hand things over to Joanna for some parting words. But thank you again so much, Craig.
Thank you. Thank you, everyone, for attending today.
Craig, thank you again so much, you and Leaf and Limb, for participating with us today. I appreciate all the information. It was great to hear from you about ways to take action and not only plant trees, but to do it in a way that really helps their health for the long term. So thank you.
Thank you once again. My apologies for the brevity in a lot of this presentation. So many of these individual topics, almost any one of the slides in this presentation, I could talk for on an hour. And so I have to limit myself just to be able to do this within the time constraints. But thank you so much for having me today.
We understand it. You did a great job keeping it brief, and I agree. You could go into so much more detail, and maybe we'll have you do that for another class. So,
that would be great. Thank you.
Great. Well, thank you everybody in the audience for participating and joining us today. We're so glad to have you here with us. Happy 2022. And if you're not currently a member, we do hope you'll consider becoming a member of the garden. Membership is really critical to all that we do in fulfilling our mission. So David is putting some links in the chat for that. And thank you for attending. And I hope to see you at the garden soon.